So I think the biggest change for Wave 3 is that there are two funding routes to choose from. Let's start with the strategic partnerships, because I think it's really clear what a strategic partnership is. So fundamentally, these are large submissions, lots of houses with a lot of ambition. So it's circa 4,000 homes as a bid size. And we're looking, that could be an individual bid size, or it could be with a consortium. If you are wanting to bid for strategic partnerships, you would have to have bid for a funding package previously. You would not have to have led on a consortium in order to apply for strategic partnerships. So you could have been part of a consortium. But if you are going to be setting up a consortium to apply for strategic partnerships, it has to have a strategic basis for coming into being. So it's not to get 4,000 homes and you're working with 4 other organizations in different parts of the country. That may not be strategic. Maybe it is, maybe you can justify it. But we're really looking at kind of more around the regional, local, coming together to form a strategic approach to looking at how you can drive retrofit in a particular area. So on that basis, you can form consortiums. If you can't form that basis, you can't get that sort of 4,000 home mark, then the challenge fund might be the one that you need to look at. So I'm going to say that the 4,000 homes is not a fixed amount, but it is a target. And I think if you're going to come with 1,000 homes for strategic partnerships, you may not get funded. And I think they have sort of ring fenced in their minds how much they want to fund on strategic partnerships. So once they have achieved that, if they achieve that with large bids, then smaller ones, if they put them through, are unlikely to get funded under that programme. So if you can't pull a bigger bid together, I think it's really important that you consider taking the challenge fund route. You could apply for strategic partnerships, just might be worthwhile completing the challenge fund application and having that in your back pocket in case you're not successful. So the second route is the challenge fund. The challenge fund is not a competition. It is there to help people get across the line. So as long as you meet minimum standards in an outline application, you will move forward to the next phase, which is around developing a phase request to submit. Once you pass that, you can start delivery. So the delivery window will run until September 2028. But as with current funding approaches, there is a grant spend period, and that is to March 2028. There is a new single cost cap, so there isn't an alignment with different EPC grades and different wall types. It's just a consistent cost cap. There is an incentivization for using of clean heat with an optional low carbon heating offer. And that's why I'm stressing previously that there's the fuel poverty factor is quite important. So if you are looking at low carbon heating, you will need to demonstrate that there will be no impact on residents' bills by putting in low carbon heating. There is an expanded inclusion of EPC C plus homes, particularly where you're looking at low carbon heating, and in previous, those that have been maybe installed in previous rounds under the demo and wave 1. There's an expanded inclusion of mixed tenure and non-social homes. So that will help with blocks and terraces where you may have homes pepper potted on an estate and need to be able to support installations across other non-social homes. As I said, we can visit homes that were completed under the demonstrator and wave 1 programs to install low carbon heating measures. There is a minimum number of homes required for the challenge fund, which is 100 homes as previously, unless you are a small landlord as defined by the social housing regulator, which is 1,000 homes or fewer, in which case there is no limit So in theory, you could put one home forward to do. I think we'd probably like to see a little bit more ambition, or if you're only doing one home, try and get you joined up with a consortium to do that. But please do consider that there is that option to try and get people with a small portfolio to come forward. So there is a new approach to KPIs, milestones and baselines, more of which is in the guidance. Okay, so eligibility criteria. I don't think there's been any change in who can apply for funding. So it's local authorities, combined authorities, registered providers, registered charities and arm's length management organisations. You will probably need to work with a lead applicant, whether that's a local authority or another consortium lead, to come on board because of the criteria. So all social housing is eligible for SHDF Wave 3, subject to the other criteria. So being EPC D or below for some measures, and where there is the requirement for, or the option for 10% of the properties to have low carbon heating, they could be EPC C or have been delivered in a previous wave. So some flexibility, I think, in the eligible properties from previous rounds. And eligible measures, again, that hasn't really changed very much. It's anything that's compatible with standard assessment procedure. I know there'll be some questions around the updates to the SAP. I'm sure they will come into play at some stage. So you could hope that something comes in within the time period, or you could submit something and we can review it if you're successful in funding and put in a change request.
So the work that everyone on this call is doing is helping to tackle some very serious public health issues. I picked out a couple of quotes here. One was from a Greenpeace study that showed that over winter, 58 people a day die. That's a coachload of people dying from cold, because a cold home makes it, well, first of all, it can create health problems, but also means it makes it more difficult to recover from health problems, and it can quickly go the wrong way. So our work is very important. On a financial aspect, the quote on the left from the BRE report on poor housing in England. So they estimate that just to the NHS, it's costing £1.4 billion per year treating people with poor housing. But then when they brought in other factors, and I know it's difficult to estimate these, about economic inactivity and so on, the cost to the economy of poor housing, they estimate as £18.5 billion a year. So we have government targets. The government has set a target for social housing to achieve SAP Band C by 2030, and we're going to adopt that. We're going to adopt that plus, so we're going to make sure that we're going to major on the ventilation. We want to deal with that poor indoor air quality, deal with that damp and mold once and for all. I know that's all consistent with PAS 2035, but that's our phase one between now and 2030 to achieve SAP Band C and good indoor air quality. By the end of 2050, there is government legislation that the UK will be a net zero emitter of CO2. Now, I'm not one who talks about our homes being net zero or a net zero programme, because I don't know what that means. So I talk about our homes being ready for net zero, because when the UK is net zero, it will be the end of gas. Now, there's a debate about whether it's going to be hydrogen or electricity or whatever. It's looking like electricity, and electricity at the moment costs 3 or 4 times what gas costs. So we want to, our challenge is to make our homes affordable to heat using the electricity. So ready for that net zero by 2050. So we can get everything else right, but if we fail on customer experience, then the property, the project will be seen as a failure. And the role of resident liaison officers, both the client side resident liaison officers and the contractors resident liaison officers, for me is really important to do all of those things that are on the left of that slide. But I just want to focus on refusals. So we've made a decision on refusals, and it's a bit like for gas servicing. We're not going to accept outright refusals. We will be sensitive. We will try to work around the needs, discuss the concerns, and explain how we're going to minimise disruption. We will consider sort of delaying projects if there's a reason why it's not a good time to do those retrofit works. But we're not going to accept outright refusals. So by 2030, all of our properties will reach that energy standard.
There's been many learnings, but I think one of the main one has been this reliance on EPC data, on making assumptions about properties ahead of a bid. Caused a lot of challenges for several of our clients, where you've put together a list of properties as part of your bid, and then once works have started and you get into the assessment stage, you're finding that the homes are already a C, or a certain archetype is providing too costly or needs a different type of measure installed, meaning that it's suddenly creating a lot of work trying to find more properties to put back in. And that also means that once you're partway through a project, from a contractor's point of view, you're having to reallocate resources. When you thought you're going to be on site, you're having to reschedule. So it really brings about quite a lot of unnecessary timing change and cost change. So we've been experimenting with some clients on Wave 2.1 and 2.2, and hopefully like to help with 3 as well, about that early collaboration with the retrofit coordinator team to really start early and help analyze your available data that you do have from Parity or another, and looking at it through a retrofitting eyes, if you like. Andy and his team are looking at data, analysing it day in, day out, and they've developed an excellent expertise of just being able to pick out the key points and really help triage those properties. We've created a bit of a bid support timeline, but we'd often start off with a desktop analysis. So once the customers put forward a set of what they think is the best set of properties to work with, be it worst first, be it easy wins around their strategy, but looking from a desktop point of view, so reducing costs. It's not expensive to do. The team will go and they'll look at the data, and they'll also go and look at Google Maps, having a look at, are the archetypes the same, what are the age of the properties, etc. On the back of that, we'll then create a property list, like a triage list, if you like, into separate buckets, depending on what your overarching strategy is. Then what we've tended to do is to look at, well, if we can put these into bucket by archetype, we can then go and do an assessment on each archetype or age, and then the assessor can go and do a typical property, and they can also, when they're there, have a look on down the road if there's further properties there, to have a look and see, well, is there anything different? Are the age of the windows terrible? Have some of them had solar PV fitted already that's not been accounted for? Once that's done, we'll then model each archetype and produce a improvement options evaluation. So very simply going through, look at where the property is now, what are the options that we've got to get it to a C or above, and then looking at the cost for each of those, so we can help work around what's most economically viable for the business, what's the best value way we can get it from here to a C. Once we've got that, we've actually got quite a good picture from a reasonable amount of work. It hasn't taken us ages. We've not spent loads of money, but we've got a good idea now of what the costs are going to be. Are the properties going to be eligible? And then that gives us a really solid foundation for going and putting in a bid, which, fingers crossed, can then run to program, and it reduces the amount of nasty surprises or change requests being put through. So it's really helped, and we're developing it further, and it's something we'd really highly recommend.